For 2,000 years, the Roman Catholic Church has been this massive force, shaping empires, art, and the lives of literally billions of people. But its story? It's anything but straightforward. It's a story that is absolutely packed with devotion, for sure, but also with some really intense controversy. People are still fiercely debating its origins, its core beliefs, and even the symbols it holds dear. So, where does that leave us? How do we even begin to unpack all of this? Is the church truly the direct, unbroken line from Christ's apostles, or is it something else entirely? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the radically different narratives that our source materials present, from the official church histories to some pretty profound and honestly very challenging critiques. All right, so let's start at the very beginning. To really get a grip on all the arguments, we first have to look at the foundational story, how a small, persecuted group of believers somehow grew into one of the most powerful global institutions in history. Okay, so the standard historical account goes something like this. It all kicks off with these early believers, part of a movement known simply as the Way. And we're not talking about grand cathedrals here. Think small, secret gatherings in people's homes. Then you have the apostles, right? Peter and Paul, who are absolutely key in building the theology and carrying that message right into the heart of the empire, Rome. But the real game changer, that happens in 313 AD. The Emperor Constantine legalizes Christianity. Just like that, it goes from being this underground movement to being protected by the state. A few years later, the Council of Nicaea nails down core Christian doctrine, and you start to see faith and empire really weave together. Then, as the Western Roman Empire starts to fall apart, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, steps into that power vacuum and becomes the central figure we recognize today. But here's where it gets fascinating. Our source materials lay out two completely opposite origin stories. On one hand, you have apostolic succession. This is the official view that the Pope's authority can be traced in an unbroken chain all the way back to the Apostle Peter. But then there's a radically different take called Babylonian Syncretism. This theory argues that the Catholic Church isn't a pure evolution of early Christianity at all. Instead, it claims it's a fusion, a mix of Christian ideas with the ancient pagan worship and rituals that came out of Babylon. Two completely different foundations. So as you can imagine, these competing origin stories lead to some major divides over core beliefs. And the sources we're looking at really highlight some fundamental disagreements that get to the very heart of the entire debate. This table really breaks it down well. Let's start with authority. The Catholic view is that Scripture and sacred tradition are on equal footing. But the critics say, no, it's sola scriptura. The Bible and the Bible alone is the ultimate authority. Then look at salvation. Catholicism teaches that you get it through faith, but then you have to maintain it with good works and sacraments. The counterargument, which is rooted in Scripture, says salvation is a totally free gift. It's received by grace through faith, period. Good works are seen as a result of being saved, not a way to keep it. And finally, the afterlife. You have the idea of purgatory, where souls get purified. But critics argue that's not biblical at all, and that the moment a believer dies, they are immediately with the Lord. And for those critics, this verse from Ephesians is, well, everything. The sources that challenge the Catholic view on salvation see this as the definitive word on the matter. It's a gift. It's not from you. It's not from works. There's no room for boasting. For them, this one passage is really the cornerstone of their whole argument. So let's talk a little more about purgatory. In Catholic theology, it's this intermediate state, a place of temporary punishment to cleanse you of sin before you can enter heaven. But the critics in our sources are really firm on this. First, they say you just can't find it anywhere in the Bible. But maybe more importantly, they argue that the very idea of purgatory suggests that Christ's sacrifice on the cross wasn't enough, that it wasn't sufficient to cleanse all sin. And to them, that's a direct contradiction of what the Bible teaches. This brings us to another huge point of contention that our sources spend a lot of time on: the role of the Virgin Mary and the saints. The word you always hear is veneration. Now, the Catholic Church is very clear on this distinction. They define veneration as honoring a saint, which they say is totally different from the worship that is due to God alone. But, and this is a big but, the critics we're looking at say that in practice, this is a distinction without a difference. They argue that any kind of prayer or reverence directed at anyone other than God himself is a form of idolatry, which is strictly forbidden in the Bible. And this is where some sources make a really wild claim. They try to trace this practice back for millennia. They allege there's a direct line from ancient Babylon, starting with the worship of a figure named Semiramis. She was the wife of Nimrod and was called the Queen of Heaven. This mother goddess cult, they claim, then spread across the ancient world, taking on names like Ishtar or Astarte. And the final step in this alleged chain, the claim that venerating Mary, especially under the title Queen of Heaven, is just a modern, Christianized version of this very same ancient pagan worship. And it goes beyond just veneration. Critics point to several official Catholic dogmas about Mary that they insist have absolutely no scriptural basis. Things like the Immaculate Conception, the idea that Mary herself was born without original sin, or her perpetual virginity, that she remained a virgin her whole life. Even the title Mother of God, they say, can be dangerously misinterpreted. And then there's the Assumption, the belief that Mary was taken, body and all, straight into heaven. Now, this whole debate isn't just stuck in ancient history or dense theology. Our sources also point to modern architecture, to symbols that they suggest have hidden meanings hiding in plain sight. Okay, check this out. The Paul VI Audience Hall in the Vatican. Critics have had a field day with this building's design. From the outside, the shape is, well, it's curved and reptilian, but inside it gets weirder. The windows look like eyes, the ceiling is textured like scales, and the stage itself looks like a mouth with fangs. The allegation from these sources is that the entire building was intentionally designed to look like a serpent's head, with the Pope literally speaking from its mouth. For these critics, that is a deeply, deeply disturbing symbol. And it doesn't stop at the Vatican. Remember that awful fire at Notre Dame Cathedral? Well, during its restoration, some really interesting theories started to pop up. Sources allege that the new design isn't just a restoration, but that it intentionally includes Masonic symbols, from the Freemasons. Specifically, they point to things like a black and white checkered floor, which is a classic feature in Masonic lodges, and a new weather vane shaped like a golden phoenix, a powerful occult symbol of rebirth. So, these specific examples of symbolism all feed into a much broader theme you find in the critical sources, that the Vatican itself is an institution that is just built on secrets. The sources point to so many different areas they see as being shrouded in secrecy. You've got the Vatican Bank, which has been tangled up in controversies and allegations of money laundering for decades. You have the papal conclaves, where the cardinals pick a new pope behind locked doors, fueling all kinds of theories about backroom deals. Then there are the legends about the massive network of tunnels and catacombs under the city and what they might be used for. And they even point to things that are right out in the open, like that giant ancient Egyptian obelisk in the middle of St. Peter's Square, as evidence of non-Christian influences right at the very heart of the church. So what we're left with is this story of incredible contrasts, right? You have a faith that started with a handful of people meeting in secret, now an institution of unbelievable global power. You have a history of apostolic faith on one side and these theories of pagan origins on the other. An institution that billions see as the one true path to God, and that its critics see as a massive ancient deception. It all boils down to one final, really tough question. When faith and history tell two completely different stories, how do you figure out which one is true?